This is a video on spirituality and achievement, or not making spirituality a goal. So the way that we live is to set up all sorts of goals, and we live in big societies with collective ideals and expectations. And of course, as we structure kind of everything in terms of social achievement, more so in certain societies than other societies, but in a lot of societies and English-speaking societies, there's a lot of focus on achievement, on getting somewhere, on becoming somebody, in quotes, right? Becoming somebody important. God, what's the expression? Proving your worth, maybe even, which is maybe a stronger way to say it. But we have this cultural dimension of, making it. So, of course, as we approach spirituality, it's natural to try to put it in the same sort of box, to apply the same social construct of achievement to spiritual practice, right? So we have this term spiritual practice. I've talked about this in other videos. I use the term spiritual practice because sometimes it's not the most natural thing to start meditating or to start exploring internally if you are not used to it. So maybe there is a bit of a practice in the beginning. But practice, as I've said in other videos, can make this feel a little bit foreign to you. And it can kind of fit it into this whole paradigm of achievement and, getting somewhere with spirituality, becoming something. People have a lot of ideas about enlightenment. We've made it like a mythological status, the Buddha's enlightened. Probably like Kim Jong-un or something is saying that he's enlightened or had said, or, who knows? I mean, we have this whole kind of, like superhero idea of spiritual realization, which doesn't serve anybody because we make spirituality something very inaccessible to ourselves. And we make a state of deep spiritual realization something fantastical, not really accessible or even really real. We take it out of our world when we mythologize it in this way. That's what mythology does. So, on the one hand, it's good to recognize that this internal state of spiritual realization is something different from many people's day-to-day, in the sense that it's a different state that a person experiences when they're connecting to something deeper with it. But it's within everybody, and it's not separate from your day-to-day. This spiritual presence is always there, no matter who you are, no matter where you are, no matter what you're doing. It's there. So, especially in spiritual communities, I see a hierarchy start to form, and I see a lot of ego start to form around, well, do you understand this idea about enlightenment? Do you understand these technical dimensions of spiritual practice? People start to grab on to the philosophy, or perhaps in a religious context onto the doctrine or the dogma. And then there's almost like a competition about how realized you are, which is like hilarious in a way. It doesn't make any sense because it's just more like having children or having a pet or something. Enlightenment or whatever. I mean, enlightenment's a weird word because it suggests like an end, like you're there, it's finished. Maybe in a way because you feel connected enough that like there's always this inner presence, and so I guess you're enlightened. But that's like there's no cutoff point. This is like a spectrum. It's just about being constantly in touch with something that you can feel. I guess that's enlightenment, but it's kind of like an unclear word in terms of how much connection, is required for you to be enlightened. What does that mean? It seems more like a fancy title than a real, really meaningful word in that sense. So when I say it's more like having children or having a pet, what I mean is that okay, maybe in some societies having children is an accomplishment, right? Certainly in the modern world, we've tried to distance ourselves from the idea that, your children are your accomplishment. People maybe still unconsciously act that way, but it's not so, cool to look at your kids as like, your accomplishments. Um, and we're definitely distancing ourselves gradually from the expectation that in order to have a full life, you have to have children or you haven't, succeeded in life. I think we get that that's kind of a weird idea now. Certainly with pets, it's even easier for us to see, which is kind of funny that it's easier for us to see with animals than with human beings, maybe, that having a dog is not an accomplishment. It's something that you do for the connection. It's something that you do because you love having a dog. And hopefully you're having children because you love your child or your children, and that's the main focus. I think inevitably it's the main focus when you have children, that those beings just occupy your attention. That's why you have children, for the children. Certainly with pets, there's no social expectation, is not that I'm aware of, that you're going to have a dog or a cat, and this is like meaning that you've made it in life because you've had you have a dog or you have two dogs or something. So that's an easy example because there's less maybe weight attached to a pet than there is in a lot of societies to having children. So if you have a dog, there's really no external validation that you're getting. I don't know, maybe people see you as a little bit more responsible for being able to take care of an animal, but I don't know how much that's there. I don't own a dog or a cat, so pet owners, tell me if there's more of a social approval that comes from having a pet than I realize, but I don't think of it this way. So if you have an animal, you're just with that animal to be with that animal and to get from that animal what you give that animal, the connection. Spiritual practice, spiritual, observation, internal observation is the same. There's no achievement, and there's like nothing that you're going to get from the outside world. Even if you do come into a deep state of connectedness, most people, like 90% of people, aren't even going to realize that that's the case. We have a very different idea socially of what a spiritual person is than what it really is, in the sense that what spirituality really is an inner state of connectedness. It's not something that necessarily manifests in a certain way externally. It's a quiet internal experience. We think that someone with that quiet internal experience, and especially in Anglo societies, because every society has a different ideal, it has a different image of what a spiritual person is, of what a realized person is. In Anglo societies, there's a strong focus on our perception of grace, which is like a swan, And for example, this is an interesting thing that I've realized in Spanish, living in Latin America. In Spanish, grace does not mean the same thing that it does in English. So in Spanish, a swan is not graceful. A swan is elegant, but not graceful. Grace is almost more force of character in Spanish than this elegant kind of finesse quality that a swan has that we call graceful in English. So that maybe points to different values culturally and what each culture thinks is a mark of divinity, basically, a mark of spiritual realization. You may be deeply in touch with something and not present like a swan, which is to say you may not, just sort of flow through society with no conflict. Having no conflict in your life in the sense that nobody's ever angry at you and you're always liked is impossible in the world. No matter who you are, you're going to rub somebody the wrong way. Even if you don't enter into direct conflict, that's going to happen. A person who is very good at avoiding conflict may not have any spiritual awareness, any direct or concrete spiritual awareness, and yet may look very graceful on the outside. So if you come into a deeper spiritual awareness and you feel that connectedness, it depends on who you are. how that will present on the outside. Maybe you will look more at ease, more centered in yourself, but that's a very subtle thing. And only people who are more in touch with themselves are going to be able to perceive that there's a shift in you, or that there's something different. And few people will value that very highly. Um, so you're not really going to get a lot from the outside world. You're not going to get like much fanfare for a state of connectedness within. In that sense, it's like having a dog or cat. You do it for you, and you do it for the world in the sense that bringing this awareness and life into your own reality, which is our collective reality. There aren't separate realities, we're in one reality. So bringing this life in is good for everybody. It's good for you, it's good for other people. But you may not get any validation for that. You probably won't. So that's really, I think, the way to address spirituality as an achievement, is that there's not really anybody to discern whether you've achieved it. You can't get that external validation because there's no board of judges to decide that that's where you are and you've made it. And if you're interested in deciding that for yourself and that's your focus, shift more to the inner experience of connectedness, the way that you would with an animal. Find the fulfillment in that experience of connectedness, which is infinitely more meaningful and like playful and warm and engaging than any idea of achievement, which is ultimately so stiff and kind of weighty and pretty arbitrary. When have you made it? Even in the normal world of work, when have you made it? Do you have to become the richest man in the world, or do you have to get tenure? What's the cutoff point? So that is a pretty flimsy idea, and it's better just to forget it and look into connectedness the way that you would with a pet and hopefully a child, and just enjoy that connectedness and forget about how it looks.